Welcome to my video podcast today. My guest on Upper Sandusky, my hometown, is Tom Eyestone. Tom Eyestone graduated back in 1967. He was a year behind me in school. We grew up together out in Eden School District and went to Upper Sandusky, obviously, and we've been friends for a long, long time. We were really competitive in our younger year. Tom graduated from Upper Sandusky and went to Columbia University in New York, and he lives now outside of Carey. They moved back. I forget what year it was now, but they moved back from New York, and he and his wife Bonnie, her name was Hobettle in high school, and they've been married a long time, and he has a really good story to tell, and I'm excited to hear it. Sit back and enjoy my video podcast and learn some things about New York City. Tom Eyestone, how are you doing today?
I'm good, John. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you. I've got this Upper Sandusky, my hometown, and you're a hometown boy. We go way, way back to in fact, you're an Eden boy.
That's right.
You're an Eden boy.
Back to the 50s.
Then we came into Upper Sandusky. Okay, Tom, what are you doing right now?
I am actually retired right now. I was 30 years approximately in mainly the technology side of the brokerage business. And then 10 years following that, I was a licensed financial advisor here in Carey, Ohio for Edward Jones. I retired in 2012. And thought, well, at least I've got all that behind me. But by that time, some friends and acquaintances had figured out that I know something about technology. So I'm just all out busy these days with all kinds of technology related and focused responsibilities, including the fact that I am the technology support guy at the Wyandotte County Fair.
Technology support. I bet that's a struggle. I bet that's a struggle sometimes.
Well, everybody is in one way or another these days saddled with some kind of technology. And most people, very honestly, especially when it comes to Microsoft, are struggling. And they have questions, they have concerns, they've got something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be understood. So pretty much on a day in, day out basis, I get questions.
Okay, that's really good. Okay, Upper Sandusky, 1967. And then tell me where you went from there. Okay.
Went to college in New York City at Columbia University. I actually played some football there, but lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And then in 1970, Bonnie, also here from Upper Sandusky, and I were married. She moved to New York City. We lived in an apartment. She taught in a public school, and we both went to graduate school. And following that, I became a college admissions counselor. Can't really quite explain why, but that's what I did for a few years out on Long Island.
Okay.
Then I went to work for a brokerage company in downtown Manhattan in the financial district, and I spent 20 years there. And then, of course, 9/11 came along, turned the financial industry upside down for a while, and led to a decision on our part to move back here. And here we are in this latter stage of our lives.
That's great. That's great. Upper Sandusky, no. Carey, yes. So you're a Carey. We won't go too far into that because people will be trashing you and everything else now.
Yes.
Believe it or not, there's still some rivalry there.
Yes, there is.
But
Yes,
Carey does. Carey, I will blow smoke. They've done really well with their town. I really like their town. I like the school. I like the town. I like a lot of things about it. And in fact, my grandson went to the Catholic school. He's kindergarten over there.
OLC, yeah.
OLC. My daughter loved it. Carey's a great place. I know that, and I'm glad you're over there. I see you bouncing around different committees and things like that too. I see your name in the paper. What committees are you on now?
Sure. Well, I'm on the board at the Angeline School and Industries.
Okay.
And that's kind of a busy thing that I do, but it's something that I care about. I'm the treasurer on the Veterans Heritage Foundation of Wyandotte County. We're mainly known for the fact that we've placed the World War memorials in Bicentennial Park,
right.
in Upper Sandusky. And then I've had some various church responsibilities and the like over the years. But these days, most of my time is taken up between Angeline and the Veterans Heritage Foundation.
Okay, we better mention now, because we're going to go into some other questions, but excuse me, mention now that your bride was from Upper Sandusky, and she's probably helped you and pushed you a little bit because she's a go-getter. Bonnie Hobettle graduated in 1966, and I have to mention her because she does quite a job. And I'm sorry she didn't want to be on the show, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, when she graduated college from Capital in Columbus, she wanted to move to New York City. Wow. I didn't need to talk her into it. And we've never even discussed what would we have done otherwise. She was planning to get there and go to work as a teacher, and indeed, that's exactly what she did.
I think, as I would guess, in some of the conversations she and I have had, teaching in Long Island or wherever she taught is a little bit different than Carey or Upper Sandusky. I would say. Especially in those days.
Very different.
Okay.
In a big school, she was a first grade teacher at the beginning in a very large 1 through 6 school with 1,700 students.
Wow.
They had six first grade classes in that school.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, I've never asked you before about this. I've heard all these rumors and stuff. Tell me how close you and Bonnie were with 9/11.
Yeah. On 9/11, that happened to be the day that the meetings in the financial business that I was associated with were being conducted in New Jersey. So I was just across the Hudson River in a building in Jersey City, New Jersey, with, let's say, a front row seat for what was going on that day. One of my staff members around 8:30 a.m. that morning, the 11th, came into my office and said, you better come and take a look. There's a plane that's hit a building. So I got up and walked around the corner, and yes, a plane had hit a building. But of course, we were all thinking, well, that's too bad, one of these tourist arrangements, but we've got work to do. So we better get back to work, because in New York, and especially New York City, there's always a distraction. You can't let it take away from your responsibilities.
Right.
So I went back to my office and got back to work. 20 minutes later, she came back in, the staff member, and said, you better come and take a look. The building is down. I said, what building? And she said, the South Tower. I thought, oh my gosh. I went and took a look, and yes, then we knew things were different. Then it was time to evacuate the building. Then I wore a pager in those days. My pager went off, and I was running the company's human resources systems, the technology side of human resources. And we were asked to produce on the spot a list of all of the company's employees who happened to have business addresses in the World Trade Center. So that took a bit of doing. And we did have people with addresses there, but nobody was there at those particular locations that day. So none of those, we didn't lose any of those people, but we did lose some people who had attended an e-commerce meeting being conducted in the Windows on the World restaurant on the 106th floor of the South Tower. A meeting, by the way, that I had an invitation to attend, but didn't because, there was work to do. So that's when we sort of figured out, well, we've got work to do, but we don't know what it is. We better figure this out. And it was kind of crazy for the remainder of that week. Although, by the end of the week, things were sort of rationalized, and we went back to work on Monday, and Wall Street opened up again for business on Monday. By then, some of the facts were well known, and it had turned into a major nationwide challenge to demonstrate that nothing was going to knock us off track.
Right. That's good. How did that affect Bonnie then as a teacher? How did that affect her?
For her, it was about figuring out how to deal with the loss of some parents of students in her first grade class, and how they were going to move forward with these seriously debilitating consequences to deal with. And she spent most of the 11th trying to learn where I was because all the communications were down.
Right.
You couldn't make a call to save yourself or send an email message or anything at all. So everybody was glued to a TV screen trying to learn something. By late morning, I was actually back home watching it on TV like everybody else, waiting to figure out what was the next thing that we were going to be doing.
I had a friend that his wife taught. They taught and I forget where, Tom, but she said her one problem was, one parent coming to pick up the kid. Like say the mom came to pick up the child and the husband, they didn't know where, things like that.
Oh yeah.
I always remembered that. Okay, let's get away from that. I really thought you were involved in that, and but I think I said I don't know if people talk about it very much and stuff.
Yeah. Well, my life
are the ones that were 500 miles away.
Let's just say that my life on a day in, day out basis was dominated for the remainder of my time at that company, which was another 9 months. Wow. Because everything was suddenly different. We had to open up in, this was home office business. We had to open up in different buildings. Right. We had 30,000 people to get moved. So just as an aside, I told you I was running the company's human resources systems. Well, among the responsibilities, there was an internal web-based employee identification system with your business phone number, your name, your department, that sort of thing. Well, suddenly there were 30,000 people with different locations, different phone numbers, different everything. How do you find out where they are? How do you get that system updated in a timely way? Those were the kinds of things we were dealing with there in the short term, immediately in the aftermath.
Okay, let's go to something totally different now. Okay, Upper Sandusky guy, 1967. What are 3 things that you remember back in those days? What are, I ask football players this all the time. What was the hype? What were things that you remember that you put in your scrapbook?
Um,
Maybe
yeah,
not a fair question.
yeah, no, that's okay. Actually, it's quite fair because once you leave, you start thinking about things through a completely different lens.
Right.
So what I remember as a kid, there was a nice and is a nice pool in Harrison Smith Park. You could walk to that pool. We'd ride a bike to that pool. All your friends would be there. We lived in some large towns, cities, New York City. They
Right.
had pools. They had pools, but it was nothing like Upper Sandusky. It was Upper Sandusky and that park and that pool. It was idyllic. Nothing in my mind then or now compares with that. Another thing was that when you'd walk the streets in town, you were in those days very likely to encounter your friends, your schoolmates, everybody else, and that just made it seem like you were all home all the time. You could depend on people, and I remember that very distinctly. One of the things that I remember that became clear to me after I had started living in New York and New Jersey was, that saying that you hear in a small town frequently is everybody knows everybody else's business. Well, it's different in the big town. Nobody, not only does nobody know anybody else's business, they don't care either. and when you realize that, it's in a way it has a tinge of sadness to it, because suddenly you realize, okay, I got some more responsibility that I better grasp correctly and figure out and handle it the right way, because the neighbors aren't exactly who I thought they were,
right?
Just based on my history, right?
Well, shoot, I thought you were going to say something about when you and I used to play one-on-one in basketball. If one of us get really mad and kick the basketball, 200 yards. Okay.
I don't remember kicking the ball really, but I do remember playing a lot of basketball and enjoying it intensely.
And fun. And I think so. Okay. A couple more questions. Why, you were there. Why, with not being personal, why move back? Why move back?
Well, by this time, we were both in our early 50s. And, usually I'd come home and once in a while, at least, mention to Bonnie that, hey, we ought to think about retirement. And frequently her response would be, "What'd you do now?" And, it was always, I didn't do anything. I'm just thinking about it. Well, then by the end of 2001, the company, where I'd been for 20 years by that time, was offering what they called the package.
Ooh.
The package. This was something that you could actually put in an application asking for approval to be terminated. I'm pretty sure that if I tried to stay years more, I would eventually have been offered an involuntary opportunity to retire, but it never got that far. When that came around and I thought about it, Bonnie's parents were still in Upper Sandusky, elderly. Their mother was in the nursing home. Her dad seemed to need some help. Bonnie was spending literally weeks at a time here to help out, especially during the summer months. And this time, or on that occasion, when I said, well, there's this thing called the package and we could wrap things up here and move back to Upper Sandusky, she said, okay, let's figure this out. So 6 months after I put in the application, we had sold the house. We were arranging to leave our jobs. And on June 22nd, 2002, we arrived back here behind a giant Beacons moving truck. And that was the end of Plan A. I didn't have a Plan B lined up at the time, but things evolved, things took their course.
I think it's really neat. I think it's really neat you got involved, and I'm not an involved guy. I think the other way, but it's really neat people do that and coming back. Okay, my last, by the way, it's great to have you on. My last question would be, I always try to tie that. What would be your advice to young people? I think when you're young, you want to kind of get away sometimes. Then you have kids, and then you kind of want to get back to raise your kids. But what is your advice to young people trying to make that decision of, do I want to go to college in South Carolina, or do I want to go in Tiffin or Findlay, or do I want to stay home in Upper Sandusky? I mean, I'm not a big pusher of four-year colleges anymore. I mean, unless you want to be a professional, I think these two-year tech schools are really, really good. And they're getting more expensive because a lot of guys are doing it.
That's probably what has made the most difference in 50 years since I had to make that decision. But at the time, everything, including tuition at an Ivy League school, seemed, certainly in retrospect, much more affordable than it is now. But what I would say to a young person is what's important and what they need to understand now is that in a certain way, being from a small town is a gift. Not everybody can say that. These kids that came from large cities, especially from New York City. I remember on 9/11, everybody was having this thought: where am I going to go now? And if you were from Manhattan, which some of my colleagues were, of course, they were thinking, well, where am I going to go? Because this isn't the place to be at the moment, ground zero, in other words. But in any event, for those of us lucky enough to be from small towns, what you learn about life in a small town is exactly what everyone else is going to wait and hopefully learn in adulthood. Something about friendship, something about other people, something about the principles that are important. I didn't have to figure those out when I ended up in New York City. But I could certainly see some of my colleagues struggling with those considerations.
Right. And I think the other thing is, Upper Sandusky is a unique, in a good way, small town. It's clean. It's there's progression. There's conservatism. Laid backness. There's people that are, I think it's a great place as far as coming up with new ideas and new energies and things like that. And I think, and plus for me, with the football business, it's so centrally located. Everything 2 hours, 2.5 hours away at worst, and things like that. Well, Tom Eyestone, I really appreciate you being on my podcast. And
John, thank you for the invitation.
I'm glad Bonnie's back in Upper Sandusky, and everything sounds really good. Okay?
Really good. Thank you, John. Joy.